Out of the gates and ready to go. It is Hot Mike with Hunter Withrow on this Monday edition, streaming live at OutKick.com. Senator Tommy Tuberville will join us coming up later this hour. Plus, Trey Wallace will be live from Houston, tonight's national championship game. Chad, good afternoon. Plenty to get to today with all the coaching decisions. We've got a national championship game. We have ESPN drama and much more.
Well, a lot has happened over the weekend. A lot has happened, and a lot has not happened when it comes to Bill Belichick, Mike Vrabel, Patriots.
So far.
Titans, two spots where we've been awaiting word all day. It's like waiting for the smoke to come out of the Vatican.
Yeah.
On the announcement of the Pope. I feel like that's the waiting game we have right now with both Patriots and Titans.
Well, we thought we would be waiting on ESPN to respond in some way to what went down on Friday with Pat McAfee and what he had to say about Norby Williamson, one of the executives and higher-ups at ESPN, where he called him a rat, saying he was giving incorrect information on ratings, leaking that to the media prior to the full release that came out. And that came out about 12 hours later, where McAfee was praising multiple executives, including the president of content, Burke Magnus, who was in a photo with McAfee on Saturday at the Colts game in Indianapolis. And McAfee is certainly doing this. He certainly knows exactly the message he's sending here. And ESPN sent out a statement, Chad, supporting both Williamson and McAfee after McAfee straight up called him a rat and said that he was out to bury the show, tank the show on purpose. How about how all this has gone down with McAfee then today doubling down, which we'll hear from that in just a moment. But I thought when we left Friday that ESPN would end up backing the guy that has been there for 40 years, that has brought them a lot of success from the linear side of television. And they're trying to play both linear and online from the streaming aspect, where the numbers are high for McAfee, and the audience is younger, much younger, and he's producing results from that level. And he certainly has not only stirred the pot, but has lived up to exactly who he said he would be in a situation like this. And they're sticking by him so far.
Yeah, it's first off, and we recapped last week, what Pat McAfee did was ballsy. And Pat McAfee, though, is also a very smart guy who knows when he does this, he's probably going to have the backing. And we know now he's got the backing because Norby Williamson's boss has his back, because he's posting photos of him on the sideline of a Colts-Texans game on Saturday night where they're all buddy-buddy. So he knows it's one executive's issue, and that's it. And that's the executive's problem, that has the issue with Pat McAfee. I look at this, though, and I can't help but think, how many companies would actually continue to function properly with something like this happening? I'm going to give ESPN a little bit of credit here, because there are clearly some huge egos at play. And we've encountered plenty of executives, and anybody who's worked in corporate media understands the egos of executives and talent at times. And when those egos start to butt heads, usually it leads to someone saying, well, he's either out or I'm out, and I'm not going to continue doing this job because this is I can't work under these conditions, right? And that's not what happened here. What happened was Pat McAfee made a play. He said exactly what his issue was and who his issue was with, and that's Norby Williamson. He called the guy a rat. He is technically his boss. To my knowledge, Norby Williamson has not said anything publicly about it. ESPN got together, went about their business, and Pat McAfee went back on his show today on ESPN, on an ESPN set, at their Super Bowl, which is the College Football National Championship game, that Adam Schefter's on set with him. Everyone at ESPN is sent to Houston to cover this game for ESPN. And what does he do? He calls him an old hag on air again and says, I got no issue with ESPN. I'm not trying to get fired. They've been supportive. He points out everyone around the set, and he goes right back at Norby Williamson. And I'm thinking, man, the freedom to do that, but also it looks okay now for ESPN because they've somehow weathered this storm and got him back on air. But is Norby Williamson just going to sit here and take it and just decide I'm not going to have anything to do and I'm going to be the villain in Pat McAfee's story and I'm going to worry about Stephen A. Smith and all of my other projects at ESPN? Or is he going to go kicking and screaming into Jimmy Pitaro's office at some point and say him or me? We haven't gotten quite that far down the road yet, Hutton. But the fact we're here right now and nothing drastic has happened is pretty crazy and not really a bad sign for ESPN. I thought it would lead to a suspension, someone having to apologize, Norby Williamson saying something, a statement being issued. Instead, the only public statement we've seen is Pat McAfee doubling down and seemingly nothing happening to him or Norby Williamson.
Well, and ESPN did release a statement saying they would handle internally. And what McAfee's doing is going public with it. Again, he doubled down today on the Pat McAfee Live where if I'm Williamson, listen to who he says McAfee's cool with and why I don't know what office you break down the door for and say it's him or me right now because I think you would already know the answer.
Not be down here in Houston, Texas at the national championship. ESPN has set us up pretty good here.
Oh, yeah. They have.
Now, there are some comments about one particular person at ESPN.
Sure.
You know, that I made only on the YouTube ESPN Plus show. That wasn't even on linear TV.
What was that?
I didn't know anybody was going to hear it because it was just on digital.
And no one does digital.
I guess everybody did hear it. It was a topic of discussion, obviously, the entire weekend.
Sure.
And the only thing that I'm like super bummed out about it all is that a guy that we like a lot, a man that watched the game with us in the suite, Burke Magnus, who is currently new guy in charge at ESPN, right below Jimmy Pitaro. I guess he was kind of made to look bad because of what I did and how I did it. I would like to let everybody know we love Burke Magnus.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Love Burke Magnus.
Love you, Burke.
And also love Jimmy Pitaro.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Love Bob Iger.
What?
But there is quite a transition era here, you know, between the old and the new. New. And the old don't like what the new be do. You know what I mean? So there is certainly going to be a couple of that, but we're very thankful. A lot of people are saying I'm trying to get fired. No way.
Whoa.
What ESPN has been able to do for us, more specifically, whenever they do things like this, you have no idea about the crew behind the scenes here that we've been working with basically all year. Not only on game day, but for our show, whenever we're traveling, we got nothing but love for all of these people. Now, there's certainly people we do not like. Certainly.
Naturally.
And they do not like us. That's how it's going to be. And I don't take back anything that I said about said person. But the overall storyline about us and ESPN, I think people need to remember, we're strong, baby.
Bingo.
We are strong, baby.
Damn
And
right.
we all understand what the future looks like. There's just some old hags that potentially don't. But we.
There's McAfee on Pat McAfee, the Pat McAfee show. Chad, not only is ESPN trying to back both, if they're handling this internally, one thing they didn't do is tell McAfee he can't talk about it because he's done it now on the very show right after. Again, McAfee's doing exactly what everyone says but doesn't follow through with. You know, you want to be authentic. He's being authentic. He's being exactly that. And he's not trying to be one thing for ESPN and behind the scenes doing something else when he's just linear, on linear when he's just online.
When he explained everything about, you know, the Aaron Rodgers deal with Jimmy Kimmel and said, we're authentic here and we're just being ourselves and we come from a good place of, hey, we want to get together as buds, talk about sports and just say whatever's on our mind and let it roll. And we don't want to hinder that in any way. I buy that to an extent with McAfee. I do not buy that he just got on there without a plan and decided to light Norby Williamson on fire without knowing he had the full backing and support of ESPN. I'm not saying he went to Burke Magnus and said, I'm going to call Norby Williamson a rat on my show today, but he knows in talks with Burke Magnus, with Jimmy Pitaro, that I'm guessing those guys don't like Norby Williamson. And they suspect Norby has tried to sabotage some things because Pat McAfee knows Norby never wanted him at ESPN. So I do think, I'm not saying they said, go ahead and say this.
Right. But Williamson's bosses, one of them is Magnus.
Exactly. He knew that Norby's bosses didn't like the way Norby was going about this.
But he also knows, I don't know if he knew that. Maybe he did. He also knows who hired him, and it's those guys.
Yeah.
Jimmy Pitaro. Magnus is the president of content. They hired McAfee to reach the audience that he's reaching, right? He knows exactly where he is. They're very. I mean, this contract has just started with ESPN. So what they're paying McAfee, he's doing exactly that. And if someone's sabotaging him behind the scenes, you're going to climb the ladder. And instead of doing that, McAfee went straight on his show and did exactly what he was hired to do. I commend him for it.
I do too. And with a full weekend to process everything, especially with the photo that went out Saturday night with them at the game together, I think less of, oh, man, he's totally fine not being at ESPN, and he's ready to burn it down if he has to get what he wants. And I think more of he's flexing a little bit because he knows that this dude's boss made the ultimate decision, even though he was the detractor. He was the 1/3 of this trifecta that wanted nothing to do with Pat McAfee, and since then has not embraced him, and in fact has outright sabotaged him with leaking it bad information about ratings to make Pat and his crew look bad, and they were just going to go on their show and say it. I think it lends a lot of street cred to the show. It already had a ton of it, but it lends some street cred to their show on ESPN, which initially that's what everyone was concerned about, right? How is this going to work? ESPN is going to tell Aaron Rodgers not to talk about vaccinations. They're going to get him to get rid of Aaron Rodgers on the show. Well, Aaron Rodgers made a joke about Jimmy Kimmel being a pedophile. And all they did was apologize on behalf of ESPN and call it a dumb joke gone wrong. And guess where Aaron Rodgers is going to be tomorrow? On the Pat McAfee show. And he's going to give his explanation on that show. So I see this as win-win-win for Pat McAfee. Norby Williamson's taking some sizable L's here. This is probably one of the things that people will remember him for because it's the most public dispute and public thing he's been a part of, and he's been at ESPN for 40 years doing a lot of good work and been a part of a lot of shows that all of us have watched over the years.
And the opposite, doing the opposite way.
It's unfortunate now that because it's seemingly kind of a petty old man about this with McAfee, that McAfee publicly called him out, that when you Google Norby Williamson now, one of the first things that pops up forever will be Pat McAfee calling him a rat while he was at ESPN. Unfortunate for him on that, but hey, there are winners and losers in sports. There are winners and losers in life. McAfee winner, Norby Williamson a loser. Ultimately, I think ESPN kind of a side winner in all of this because the McAfee show gets more credibility. He's going to continue on with ESPN. Everyone's going to tune in and watch Aaron Rodgers tomorrow. Not all publicity when it comes to stuff like this can be bad. It can kind of raise the profile of everything, and I think it's doing it.
Something just to ponder as we'll get to the Black Monday with the coaching changes. There's still something beneath the surface with this. McAfee's still saying he's doubling down on it. He said there's no apology in what he said.
No.
He's not even close. So, I mean, there still is something brewing. And Chad, we've been in situations. Things brew behind the scenes before they reach the surface.
Absolutely.
Right? This is not the first time that things have been discussed in this way or in this manner behind the scenes, behind the door with ESPN, right? So, but based on the statement that they support both, they're handling internally, my guess is things have been handled internally for a while, even if it's, off the record chats.
And I think you probably have two guys who are expecting apology from the other, and neither one's going to do it. I think Norby Williamson's probably gone to his boss at some point and said, you need to cool it with this guy. He needs to apologize to me.
Yeah.
And Pat McAfee's saying, screw that. This dude owes me an apology. We're trying to sabotage our show because I know he's been leaking information about our show. So you tell him to come apologize to me. So until then, I mean, I guess it goes away, right? It's not going to be Howard Stern with pig vomit over and over again. But
whenever
McAfee has shown that he's going to say exactly what he thinks about Norby Williamson and anything else and anyone else at any time.
But Stern made a long bit about his boss at WNBC, right? How it goes as long as McAfee wants it to go, or until the next ratings release.
Or until Norby Williamson. I don't know. Is Norby Williamson the type of guy and character that's just going to be okay with being the butt of a bit and a joke forever of Pat McAfee making fun of him?
It's not up to him. It's up to ESPN. I mean, what is surprising to me is that McAfee doubled down the day after the previous show with the same sentiment. And we had all weekend. And he was hanging with Magnus, the president of content. Posted the photo.
It's nuts. It's been a fun story to follow, and we get more news out of their show.
There's the photo. There's
Burke Magnus in the middle of all the McAfee guys.
Look at Magnus.
At Lucas Oil Stadium. What a great name, by the way. With a name like Burke Magnus, you were born for management. You were born for some sort of executive status. And there he is at the Colts-Texans game with McAfee. That was a big flex on McAfee's part, I think, for them to post that. And he even said, as we heard, hey, I didn't want to make him look bad in doing that, like we're taunting, right, Norby Williamson, but he's a friend. And he knows exactly what he's doing.
And we know who's not a friend.
When he posts that. Right.
Colleague. Someone's a colleague. Speaking of flexing, we are about to see Jim Harbaugh flex. Playing in the national title tonight, coaching for Michigan. But also, the connection with the Chargers makes a ton of sense. The job has been open. Staley fired. They had the three open jobs that we know, Panthers and Chargers, as well as the Raiders. Now we know of two more as we have the show currently with the moves that have been made today and yesterday, but today with the Commanders, yesterday, midnight technically, with Arthur Smith and the Falcons. But Josh Harris, who paid $6 billion to purchase the Commanders, now has a clean front office. They've also fired the general manager. And if you're Jim Harbaugh, you're not just going to go where you're exactly connected to. I'm sure he wants the Chargers position. But you play the game with the billionaires. With the two openings, Atlanta kept their general manager, but Harbaugh's going to command more control. Mike Vrabel, up in the air on if he's going to return to the Titans. Supposedly he's meeting with Amy Adams-Strunk, the Titans owner. He wants to make sure that there is a structure in place that's in line with the rebuild that he has in mind. What's going on in New England with Bill Belichick? Commanders are going to trade for one of these guys. They're going to be in the mix, and Harbaugh's name is going to be tied to literally any open job because Harbaugh is going to allow that to go down. And when he ultimately ends up with the Chargers, he's going to end up with more power and more control because of that. Still waiting on news from Patriots, Titans. Should also mention the Saints. Dennis Allen wins in a blowout as the head coach of the New Orleans Saints yesterday. But, players, Jameis Winston and company, going rogue to score a touchdown against Arthur Smith and the Atlanta Falcons. Players going rogue doesn't mean that, to me, Chad, that Dennis Allen has much control over his locker room. If he's telling them to take a knee, they're calling a knee, and they don't. And there could be some other surprises along the way. Pete Carroll is saying that he's got a lot of energy left. He still has love for coaching. He's not retiring, so he's staying in Seattle. And we wait on more news. No surprise, really, that Atlanta's open. Certainly no surprise that Ron Rivera is let go, not retained in Washington. And it won't be a surprise when Harbaugh's name is mentioned for literally any opening as we await more. Currently at 5.
Yeah, and based on all the reports, it's the two names that you're hearing at almost all of these spots is Jim Harbaugh and Bill Belichick. Washington may be interested in Bill Belichick if he's available. Washington is definitely interested in Jim Harbaugh. Another report today, and I forget exactly who put it out there, but someone linking Atlanta with Bill Belichick also. So, yeah, no mistake about it. You got possibly the greatest coach of all time in the NFL that's available, and a guy who's going to be the hottest name coming out of college with what he's done at Michigan, and who also got the San Francisco 49ers to the Super Bowl. They're going to be the two hottest names on the market. I am shocked that Dennis Allen still has a job. I really thought when we saw that testy exchange between him and Arthur Smith yesterday, I'm thinking these are two guys that are going to be out of a job. One, because his season completely fell apart after his owner gave him the dreaded vote of confidence that as long as things don't completely fall apart, he's going to be back, and they fell apart, and you had him on the losing end of a blowout. And then the other coach who disappointed this year and can't even get his guys to run the play that he wants them to run at the end of the game, that could be evidence enough to fire the coach also.
It's thought that he's going to be back.
It's been lighter than expected, though,
for what
we could have had, but we still could have more coming.
And is there definitive word from Chicago? Not as of right now. Again, we will have more with that. The one surprise could end up being Mike McCarthy. The Dallas Cowboys just won their second division title in 3 years. And Jerry Jones postgame said with McCarthy, we'll wait and see. We'll see how things go when asked about McCarthy's job security as they go into the postseason to take on the Green Bay Packers.
Dak Prescott not wearing the NFC's champion hat or shirt or anything and said, I've had accolades like this before. I'm not going to get caught up in that. We got a lot more that we want to accomplish. And I heard that and immediately thought, oh, yeah, you definitely do.
Yes.
But the season starts now. In the eyes of Big Jerry, it starts right now. And this is where you are being judged, both Dak Prescott and Mike McCarthy, is how they're going to perform now in the playoffs. If they lose to this Packers team on Sunday at 4:30 Eastern time, I believe McCarthy's done.
I agree.
And I don't know that even that, just winning that game may not be enough. It may be NFC Championship game or bust. It may be Super Bowl or someone's fired this year. Expectations are high, and I credit Dak Prescott for knowing exactly how high they are this year.
3 straight seasons of 12 wins for the Dallas Cowboys. Mike Vrabel has been a part of a lot of wins here in Nashville where we broadcast for the Tennessee Titans. Chad, the decision on Vrabel after a losing season and a one where they chose to kind of halfway in or out on a rebuild, a restructure of their roster. Will Levis seems to be the quarterback, not just of the future, but they ended up being the here and now when Tannehill went down. They end the season, though, with Tannehill and Henry in the lineup. They didn't trade either one of them at the deadline. Vrabel wants to win. Certainly tired of losing. Hates it. And, well, there's more losing on the horizon, at least in my eyes, because there's a total roster rebuild on the immediate future checklist. And that ends up making this a very interesting Black Monday decision because Amy Adams-Strunk and new general manager Rand Carthon have both been quiet all season. And there's always been a rumbling about what's going to happen with Mike Vrabel. Does he want to be in New England? Does he want out? Is he asking to be fired? You're thinking this is the most interesting news nugget that we still don't know about. They still haven't, to my knowledge, scheduled that end of season presser.
I'm fascinated by it, Hutton, because it appears that you have not just a power struggle, but this ideological battle that's being waged with Mike Vrabel versus Amy Adams-Strunk, maybe versus Rand Carthon, but also maybe just Mike Vrabel not having a lot of faith in Rand Carthon as a general manager in this spot right now, but maybe he likes him as a talent evaluator and someone that can help get the organization back, but not the ultimate set. Who knows? But one thing's for sure. You've got this struggle of coach who everyone around the league says would have a job like that if he was gone from the Titans versus a coach that everyone here in Nashville has watched lose a ton of games starting in the back half of last year and throughout this year. And they've lost a lot of close games in very similar fashion. Record's not good after a good start to his tenure in Nashville, yet everyone believes he's one of the top coaches in the NFL and he's going to get a job immediately. So, in one hand, you got a coach going into the meeting with the owner that should be nervous about their job, coming off a big losing streak to end the previous season where they had the playoffs all but locked up, could not win the division, could not win the playoffs, and then more disappointment the following year, should be in a situation where he's nervous about his job, meeting with the owner, hoping to sell himself to the owner and the direction moving forward. And instead, what we may have is a head coach who is so cocksure about himself and knows he's going to get a job anywhere else, is going to walk into that meeting and say, I don't like the direction of everything you have going here. Here's how we fix it. These are the things out of my control. Let's get it going in the other direction, or I'm going to be gone, or you need to trade me or fire me or whatever. I'm fascinated by this waiting game, Hutton. The longer it goes with both New England and the Titans, I can't help but think that maybe those two are in conversation at least about what it would take. Hey, are you really that in on Mike Vrabel being your coach if you're Robert Kraft? Talks with him about it. What's it going to take to trade for that to happen? A lot of intrigue with both of these spots right now.
Yeah, man, I'm with you on this. And the trade discussion would be taking place based off of a conversation that Vrabel would be having with team owner Amy Adams-Strunk. And I don't know if they've actually had that conversation. mean, does Vrabel want to be there, and does Strunk want him there? Or could be different answers. But the dynamic with Vrabel and the new general manager, Rand Carthon, where it doesn't appear to me that Vrabel selected him, like signed off on or gave an opinion on. He wanted Carthon as his GM whenever this hiring took place earlier this year or last year. Chad, I'm thinking to myself, he's wanting a certain and specific path if they're going to rebuild. And I don't think it includes whatever the line of thinking, the mantra, the identity is of what they're doing right now and where they're headed. It comes across, just again, this has been boiling, and it boiled up to the surface. It's been going on since around the time that he went to New England to get into the Patriots Hall of Fame, where you see him, he's with Robert Kraft, and then right after that, Ben Volen had the report out of Boston that he was their dream candidate if Belichick were to leave, or whenever he left. Mike Vrabel was the dream candidate to be the next head coach of the New England Patriots. Well, since then, there have been other reports coming out of the New England area, and it's assumed, well, that's just leaks from inside the Patriots. This has been going on for a while, and we're just now seeing the national storyline play out, where he's coming back, and it's a very specific criteria that he wants whenever he comes back. I think Carthon could still be a part of it, but I think others could be too. And then is he fired? Is he traded? You've got to trade him if you're going to lose him, but you also have to have the team that would just say, well, if you want to trade him, we've been following this. You're probably going to fire him anyway. You're paying your former general manager $4 million. What do you trade draft assets to the Titans to get Vrabel, or do you go and hire one of these young up-and-coming coaches that's a coordinator right now?
I mean, I would not. Let me answer that. I think it'd be insane if they were to give up a first-round pick for Mike Vrabel when they could hire Gerard Mayo. Let's say if you wanted to hire a Patriot person that's been around for a while, you could take a chance on that. Mike Vrabel's record is bad the last 2 years. I'm not saying he's a bad head coach, but that would be an extreme risk, even for an organization that feels like they know the guy, to give up that level of draft capital to go get Mike Vrabel, who may get fired in Nashville regardless after these last 2 seasons. And to give that up in a trade, that would be great news for the Titans.
I think they also
believe
know
if they actually got something like that, a first-round pick in exchange, and then could go hire whoever they wanted and had that draft capital from the Patriots, that is a win for the Titans if that happens. It's not just the reports coming out of New England, Hutton, that everyone immediately said, oh, this is just the Patriots doing this or saying this. It's what Mike Vrabel said in New England. If you remember, he had that passing comment about, you don't know how good you have it up here. Trust me, I've been other places. There's no place like this place. This place knows how to conduct business and knows how to get it done. Everyone kind of discarded it and said, oh, he was with the Texans, or he's not talking about his current job, surely. I'm thinking, no, he probably is. And there's probably something that set him off. And maybe that something was him not getting his way on something where he thought he had the ability to get his way on it, and the owner saw differently.
Well,
and there's been a divide since.
Yeah, I think it's the structure and the dynamic of where the direction of the organization. It's got to be, because he's the former coach of the year with a poor roster due to injuries. And the poor roster this year is not due to injury. But you also look at the direction of the franchise, and he knows if he's back and they suck next year, which they probably will, he's going to be fired. So why? I mean, he's also a coach who speaks his mind. And read into it this way too, Chad. What he said in New England, that's exactly why New England would want him, because he knows exactly who they are and the criteria and the expectation and the Patriot way. That's also why you would bring in someone like Mike Vrabel. That's why you would trade for him. I don't know if it would take a first-round pick.
I'll say this. Mike Vrabel is big on, I want to be here. I think he said this about the Titans. I want to be here as long as we're in it to win it, and as long as we're winning. And well, you're not going to win anytime soon in New England, the way I look at that quarterback situation right now.
But you're not going to face the same
level of pressure going into next year?
I don't think he's worried about pressure. I think he's worried about blame. And next year, he'll be blamed for the results next year in Nashville. If it's just run it back, he'll be fired. Next year in New England, he's rebuilding it. He's rebuilding it his way.
Yeah.
There's a structure and a path and there's a plan.
Yeah.
I think that's what needs to be addressed in whatever ownership and Vrabel and Carthon will be discussing at some point down the line. As
of 4:30 Eastern time right now, a lot of silence from both Foxborough and from Nashville.
Yeah, and just talking with people in the organization, it's also just they're kind of waiting around too with that. Playoffs. We get some solid matchups and some surprising ones based on the Week 18 results. Looking at the NFC, it's all of a sudden Philadelphia. They've lost 5 of their last 6. They lose A.J. Brown to a knee injury yesterday. They also have Jalen Hurts, who has a finger issue on his throwing hand. They head to Tampa Bay to take on Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers. San Francisco, of course, with the bye, but Detroit will be hosting the Rams. Stafford back in Detroit. That will be an awesome atmosphere. Dallas hosts Green Bay, who Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur, they get it done. The 7 seed win in their end, and they take care of business at home against Chicago. Favorite matchup on the NFC side, Chad? Mine's Detroit and
I think it's pretty simple for me. If you're looking at eyeballs, it's Green Bay, Dallas, which is just going to be a ratings bonanza for those two organizations. But it's Sunday Night Football, Matthew Stafford returning to Detroit.
Yeah.
Detroit is my darling team. Detroit and Cleveland, two organizations that have not had any success. You root for them to finally have something good happen for them. So I want to see Detroit do some good things. And the full circle moment of everyone talking about the Detroit Lions fan mentality, watching Matthew Stafford win that Super Bowl in year 1 after the Cabo visit, with Sean McVay, the trade
randomly
going down. And you're thinking, man, this is a guy we supported, we loved here in Detroit, and he goes away, and you just feel so bad because the idea is, man, I just had to get out of Detroit, and then it was Super Bowl. Won that trophy the moment I got out of this wretched city and this terrible organization. And then Jared Goff to just get thrown out with the trash and say, hey, we know you got us to a Super Bowl, Jared, but see ya. You're not the one to win the Super Bowl. Matthew Stafford's that guy. He wins it. And now to get that chance of, I don't know if justice is the right word, but, man, it feels like a big level of vindication for what Dan Campbell has done for the Lions. If they can now beat Matthew Stafford and the Rams after that trade, after the Rams won their Super Bowl, on their way to big things in the playoffs, I'm rooting like hell for the Lions to get it done. It's a cool story.
Yes. In the AFC, the Bills power back in late November and through December. They win on the road in Miami. They clinch the AFC East. That means they'll be taking on later this week Pittsburgh. They're hosting Pittsburgh at home. And with the loss, not only does Miami lose the ability to host a game, they go on the road to Kansas City, where it is going to be probably the coldest game of the year. Expected temperatures extremely low in KC, the game that will be streamed exclusively on Peacock. The schedule throughout the weekend on Saturday, Cleveland, they hit the road to take on Houston after Jacksonville. They lose in Tennessee. Houston clinches the AFC South because of their victory in Indianapolis. Miami and Kansas City on Peacock at 8 o'clock Saturday night. Sunday, Pittsburgh against Buffalo. Starts at 1 o'clock Eastern on CBS. Dallas hosts Green Bay. Detroit and Los Angeles, the nightcap on Sunday. And then Monday, Tampa Bay hosting Philadelphia, with a lot going wrong with the Eagles.
It's going to be freezing in Kansas City, and I must say I do not have a ton of faith in Tua right now in this Dolphins team, and especially with him at quarterback. I am losing faith by the week in their ability to win big games and win in the playoffs. I like the Chiefs. I like the Chiefs, battle-tested, and I even with all their offensive problems, I do not like the trajectory right now of Tua Tagovailoa with that Dolphins offense.
So that game Saturday, it is 13 degrees, and it will feels like temperature, Chad, of 1 degree.
Hutton, you
I've been
love
there.
feels like temperatures.
Yeah, it's going to be 1.
Just make it the temperature.
It will be 1.
Here's the crazy thing about feels like temperature. It could just be the temperature. That maybe it's going to be 1 degree. That's Hutton, that's what we're going to be saying.
Maybe
1 degree in Kansas City.
1 degree. Philadelphia, one of the losers from Week 18. The big winners, Steelers and Packers, for getting into the postseason. But Philadelphia, who tried to win this game against New York, they lose A.J. Brown to a knee injury, and Jalen Hurts among a group that's banged up. They're going in dead on arrival. And Jacksonville, the Jaguars, win against the Titans. Win against the Titans on the road, and you're in. Trevor Lawrence, shoulder issue, whatever. You got to win that game. And Chad, they weren't close. They didn't play like they wanted it. And Houston wins the division. You're AFC South champ. Jacksonville flies back home, and they're done. They're sent packing. What a,
lethargic effort by
they
them.
just went through the motions.
Yeah, we were both in the building for that one, Hutton. 2 years ago was when the Frank Reich coach Colts team went to Jacksonville, lost to a terrible Jags team, right? The end of the season.
Yes.
Where they had an interim coach after Urban Meyer was fired.
Yep.
And remember Frank Reich's reaction to the game on the Hard Knocks in-season edition and how awful it looked for them. I had memories of that moment watching the Jags perform yesterday. And I'll say this about Trevor Lawrence. He's had moments where he has looked like a guy who is a transcendent type talent coming into the league.
Yep.
But overall, he has been disappointing.
I agree.
So far as an NFL quarterback. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. He was damn terrible yesterday. And watching him up close, that 4th and 3, where he's not even pressured, and he's throwing it to a receiver who's covered, and not only is he throwing it to a covered receiver 7 yards over his head and 90 miles per hour with no chance, gave his team no opportunity to convert a must on 4th and 3 and to lose the game. Him going rogue and trying to go Air Jordan into the end zone on an audible and falling short, it was terrible from Trevor Lawrence.
I think in a normal game where it's not win and in, he probably is inactive. I think that some of those errant throws, were based on the shoulder issue. It was just throwing shoulder. But he still played. He had to play in that game. There's no doubt about it. But that team's got to pick up the slack.
Well, the one he's going to want back is the one where he had the nice throw to Zay Jones for the one long touchdown, and then I think the second last drive of the game, he's got him for a touchdown and just overthrows it a little bit.
Yep.